Okay, now.
Okay. First, I want to bring it back to where it all began. The first person that we were able to find in our family history was Angelo Tony Esposito, but I cannot find where he was born. But his son was born in Tuscania, Italy. So I quick popped up a picture there. There's a picture today lower, where it looks like an abandoned castle, but there are lots of little villages all around it to this day. So the name Esposito is a very common name in Italian, and it was most prevalent in Naples, and where I found Joseph was actually up in the Tuscany area. So a little bit more for me to research about Angelo going down the line. So although it derives from Latin, it pretty much kind of meant to place outside, to expose, to place outside. Mostly the Espositos were placed, it sounds like, outside of the churches. And Esposito was given to the name of the orphans who were dropped off and left there. So technically our family is derived from orphan. Where and who our real ancestors were who left us on that doorstep is still yet haven't been able to find that. But I'm guessing since it derived from around Naples, I still have to do a lot of research to go from Naples to Tuscany and how we wound up there. At the bottom, it actually talks about how that the children were placed on almost a type of wheel that would actually work, that they could place the baby in the wheel and it would actually rotate and it would go into the church and they could pick the baby up off of the wheel and it could be anonymous. And they were out of date about 1815 to 1871. There was the unification of Italy where things like dropping your children off at churches for no good reason was illegal and they couldn't do it anymore. So somehow before 1815 we became an orphan and we don't know where. So, but I thought I would share some of that back history with all of you today. My family history line as far as it partakes to Hammonton. My great-great-great-grandfather, Angelo Tony Esposito, is buried at the Oak Grove Cemetery in town. He was born in Italy, I don't know where, in 1823, and he died in Hammonton on October 19, 1994, and he was a carpenter by trade. His wife is unknown. My great-great-grandfather and grandmother, Joseph Esposito, born September 20th, 1847 in Tuscania, Lazio, Italy, and died May 28, 1905 in Hammonton. His wife was Anna Lori, also born in Italy, April 27, 1863, and died June 2nd, 1911 in Philadelphia, PA. He was a traveling musician with a band, and he went from hotel to hotel from Italy up through France, and he left from France and traveled over to America, where he continued to travel hotel to hotel with the band, performing in different hotels. I don't know the name of the hotels, but there were quite an array of different cities that he had gone to. He had married Anna in 1877 when he decided to settle down and buy a farm in Hammonton. There was a 16-year age difference between them. She was 14 and he was 30, but this was much more common in that time period. And from the records, shows that they moved from Philadelphia to Hammonton in about 1900. So some of the children that they had were born in Philadelphia, and a few of them were born up to the years pretty much she had passed away. Obviously, him passing away first. So that is all of their grave sites over at the Oak Grove Cemetery. Angelo's is almost indistinguishable at the top to be able to read at this point, but Anna and Joseph's are down below, and they are buried together, and both of their names are on the cross. Joe and Anna's children. It's when Howard started doing the research, which I love him for doing, because everyone always thought that Anthony was the oldest child. No one knew that Amelia was the oldest. They thought she was born after him, and no one knew Cecilia existed. because she was already married and out of the house, so when the census started, she was never discovered as being one of their children. So it quickly went from 13 to 16 because also they never counted any of the babies who had passed away at birth. So going through everyone, we have Celia Esposito, who married Luigi Spinelli and had 11 children. Amelia E. Esposito married Andrew Appello. They didn't have any children. Anthony Laurie Esposito married my great-grandmother, Myrtle Victorine Seeds, and they had 3 children. One, their oldest, had died at birth, and 2 more that were known in town afterwards. Rosie Esposito married Frank Messino and had 9 children. Farowena, which is I think how you pronounce it, died at birth. Florence Esposito, who married Charles Scarpa, had 5 children. Sarisa married John Baptist Crescenzo and had 5 children. Santina died at birth. Mary Esposito married Joseph Calvi and had 5 children. Angelo married Rini Bernard and she had 2 children. Nicholas Esposito married Anna Agnes Valentino and had 8 children. Joseph A. Teresa married Teresa Vivian Ruba, didn't have any children. There is a baby Esposito, and all it says is baby Esposito. It didn't actually have a name, so I don't know if it was a boy or a girl. Then there was Letitia, who married Frank Valentino and had 5 children. William Esposito, who married Catherine Palea with 3 children. And Humbert, who married Vera Margaret Langley and had 3 children. As you can see, this family is gigantic. And as you can see, which is why in my reading it said, I found a whole lot of Esposito, because that is a whole lot to track down. And not everyone settled in Hammonton. A lot of people settled outside, some stayed within, but they're everywhere. And considering it's such a common name in Italy, it's not as common in South Jersey as you would think. This is a transcript that Howard had found, and he had translated it because it was almost illegible. And I have that printed out to read. But mainly what it's stating is that my great-grandfather became the guardian of his younger siblings once his mother had passed away, because if he had not, they all would have been sent to orphanages and put on welfare. And by him taking them in and becoming their main guardian, he made sure that all of them had everything that they needed after that. Since he was already in school, he made sure that a lot of them were able to go to college afterwards. So that was pretty great during that time to be able to make sure that he sent his siblings to school while also running a hospital, being a surgeon, and being a father. So I have that transcript with me. The following transcripts of bonds is executed by Anthony L. Esposito upon the mother's death in Philadelphia, June 2nd, 1911. It appears to me that Anthony took on the responsibility of guardian and caretaker for the minors left in his mother's death. Minors left without parents could end up as a ward of the state. Anthony had to ensure the welfare and perform his duties as guardian, or would have to pay the state of New Jersey as described in these bonds. Documented on page 294, item 596, guardian agreement of children over the age of 14. In the matter of the guardianship of Angelo Esposito and Nicholas Esposito, minors, known men by these presents that we, Anthony Esposito of Hammonton, New Jersey, as principal and American Bonding Company of Baltimore, a corporation of the state of Maryland, are held and firmly bound into the ordinary of the state of New Jersey in the sum of $1,200, lawful money of the United States of America, to be paid to the said ordinary, his successors as assigned, to which payment will and truly be made. We bind ourselves and each other and each of our heirs, executors, and severally firmly by these presents, sealed with are seals and dated the 17th day of August, 1911. The condition of the obligation is such that whereas the surrogate of the county of Atlantic has appointed in the said Anthony Esposito to be guardian of the persons and property of Nicholas Esposito and Angela Esposito, minors above the age of 14. Now therefore, if the said Anthony Esposito shall faithfully execute his office of guardian, then his obligation shall be void, otherwise to remain in full force and virtue. So that's just a small section. Pretty much everyone over the age of 14 was that. Under the age of 14, he was given the guardianship of Joseph Esposito, Ludi Esposito, which I assume is Letitia. They put it in documentation though as her nickname, William Esposito and Humbert Esposito, where it states the same exact thing, except that each child would be $1,600, not $1,200. So that was something that Howard found that we thought was pretty interesting because he could have very easily not paid and had all of his siblings with him. And we thought that was pretty interesting of the time. On to my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. Well, it's a long story. And I found a newspaper clipping about how they met at the operating table. And it's interesting because they were married before they were married to the outside world. So I translated it here on the side, which I'm going to read to everyone. Met at operating table. Pretty romance revealed by marriage of doctor and nurse. A little romance came in light in the West Philadelphia Homeopathic Hospital yesterday when it became known that Dr. Anthony Esposito, a resident physician, has been married since last summer to Miss Myrtle Feed, a nurse. The couple left the institution yesterday following the bride's graduation for Virginia, where they will make their home. Miss Seeds is the daughter of Irwin W. Seeds, a builder of Lanark. I looked up Lanark. Apparently it's a county. She formerly lived at number 520 South 59th Street. Dr. Anthony Esposito is from Hammonton, New Jersey, and is a graduate of the class of 1913 from Hammonton. The romance started nearly 3 years ago when Miss Seeds, as a pupil nurse, went through her first experience in the operating room. It was there she first met Dr. Esposito, who was fresh from college. Was witnessing an operation. Miss Seeds was somewhat nervous, and in her anxiety to make good as a clinical nurse, handed the surgeon the wrong side suturing silk. Dr. Esposito immediately saw her mistake and gave her the right material. Their eyes met, and then for a second, as Cupid shot his arrow, they stood each holding one end of the silk. From then on, the romance grew until they became secretly engaged. Last summer, they eloped during their vacation, and on July 12th were married at Elkton, Maryland. The marriage was kept secret until Miss Seeds received her diploma as a graduate nurse yesterday, and they started their postponed honeymoon. It's amazing how newspapers used to write. And a very cute story to have about my great-grandparents. Back then there was no fraternization between doctors and nurses, which is why they kept it secret for so long. Until she had graduated, and then they were able to talk about it. The amazing thing to me from reading this and another article that's very similar to this about my grandparents, or great-grandparents, is that it talks about them moving to Virginia. And I'm amazed by that because no documents do I find that they ever actually lived in Virginia. And although they had 3 children technically, I still to this day cannot find out where their first daughter, their first child who died a few days after she was born, is buried. And I kind of think maybe I should look in Virginia now because I can't find anything here or in Philadelphia. But I am amazed at how they documented everything so well in the newspaper then. This is from a Who's Who of New Jersey book that's actually pretty rare. Not too many people have it, but we do in our family. I left out this section of this article that they wrote about his past with his parents and his siblings, because every single one of the his brothers and sisters' names they spelled incorrectly, and they didn't even mention all of them. So I left that part out since I already named them, and I left out the part about his marriage since we went over that just a slide ago. But Dr. Anthony L. Laurie Esposito, son of Joseph B. and Annie Laurie Esposito, was born in Hammonton, New Jersey, November 14, 1886, and after graduation from Hammonton High School in 1904, matriculated to the University of Pennsylvania, where he continued his studies for 2 years. He then began his profession study in Hammonton Medical School, from which he was graduated in 1913 with his doctor's degree in medicine. After serving an internship 1 year in West Philadelphia General Hospital, he was made chief resident physician of the hospital, and in that position he held for a period of 2 years. Having gained valuable experience by this extended hospital service, he went to Baltimore, Maryland, where for 2 years he was engaged in a general practice. I'm assuming this is where he met my great-grandmother for the first time, because she lived in Maryland. During his hospital, he specialized in the diseases of the nose and throat. For when he came to Hammonton, after 2 years of successful practice in Baltimore, he added to his work as a specialist general practice as well. He conducts a private hospital and owns the only ambulance in town. He has established an inevitable reputation as the leading physician and surgeon of the Hammonton section of the county, and has won in a very high degree the confidence and esteem of the community, as well as the clientele which he serves. He has served as coroner since 1920. He is a member of the American Medical Association, of the New Jersey State Medical Association, and the Atlantic County Medical Society. Fraternally, he is affiliated with the Loyal Order of the Moose of Hammonton, and is a member of the Kiwanis Club. Do we have any mooses left in town?
Yeah.
So when I said about in and around about, I wanted to give some part of the history of my great-grandfather as a surgeon. So this is the West Philadelphia General Homeopathic Hospital and its ambulance. And that is him sitting in the front. I was lucky to find this book that apparently nobody knew about until my grandfather passed away, and my little cousin pulled it out of a stack of books that they had in the library on their house on Bellevue Avenue. And inside this composition book is multiple clippings, newspaper clippings, of the amazing things and the bigger-than-life person that my great-grandfather was in Philadelphia. So it's to the point where it's practically breaking up and brittle now, so I tried to scan everything in over the past couple years. And I picked out a few of the extraordinary stories to share with you today. Everyone knows about the tonsils, how he took out his own tonsils. Kind of amazing. But what I didn't know is that there is a published article about it that I could find online to this day on Google, that I found it all across the country. This was published, that he removed his own tonsils. And I thought that was amazing. I listed a couple of the papers above. Bartlett, Texas, University of Illinois, Gettysburg, and Reading were just a few that immediately popped up on Google showing this article, that Dr. Esposito sat in a chair before a mirror in his own office today and removed his left tonsil. He said he was going to remove the right one after the primary election on September 17th. Dr. Esposito is a candidate for the Republican nomination for coroner of Atlantic County, which I didn't know they even existed. Well, I knew coroners existed. I didn't know that there was a nomination. Political wags said he removed his tonsil because he did not want to make a campaign speech. Dr. Esposito has a reputation locally as being very unloquacious. Yeah, I had to look that one up because you don't see that very often. But pretty much says he was pretty chatty, which works out pretty well in our family, actually. So I thought it was amazing that In our town, this is our story. Everyone knows how this doctor, my great-grandfather, took out his tonsils, but I didn't know other people in the country did. And that to me was one of the signs about him being bigger than life. I call him the amazing courage doctor. The top article, boy sees fingers cut off. Don't cut them too short, he said. He begged the surgeon. I want to be a violin player. An 8-year-old boy calmly watched the amputation of his 3 fingers without use of an anesthetic last night at the West Philadelphia Homeopathic Hospital. The lad is Joseph Coladanto of 681 Lansdowne Avenue. It's amazing how they used to print your address. Don't cut them too close, he begged of the surgeon. I want to be a violin player. As Dr. NJ-Esposito applied the knives and saws, the little fellow clamped his lips, and although a tear or two came involuntarily from his eyes, the patient made no outcry. The police of 69th Street and Lancaster Avenue Station have heard 5 stories of how the boy's hand was injured. The boy says he was playing in a shanty and was leaning against the wall with his hand when a shot was fired through the wall. Lieutenant Ewing is personally investigating this case. There's a second article that's harder to read than this one, but pretty much the boy was leaning against the wall when a gun went off and it took part of his fingers off, so the rest of them had to be amputated. So that's one story. Another story, physician climbs pole to aid man. Dr. Antonio Esposito, West Philadelphia Homeopathic Hospital, climbed to the top of the 40-foot PRR signal post near Overbrook Station this afternoon to administer restorative to an electrician who has been burned and shocked into unconsciousness when his body came in contact with a high-tension feed wire. The victim, Henry S. Graley, 28 years old, Lancaster, PA, was examining a wire on top of the signal post when he slipped and fell against the feed cable, part of the recently installed overhead system for electrical trains. He was thrown across two cross beams, where he lays as if dead, his clothing afire. Fellow workmen quickly climbed to the pole and beat out the flames, but could not lower the body because of the victim's condition. After reviving the man, Dr. Esposito improvised harness about the victim's body, and then, with the assistance of the workmen, lowered him to the ground. Greeley was hurried to the West Philadelphia Homeopathic Hospital, where his feet were found to have been badly burned. Now, I don't know about you, but how many doctors do you know climb a pole to save someone's life? Not too many these days. This is their old house, which originally was Judge Burns' house. I didn't put the story in here, but when Judge Burns lived in this house, and he rented the farm that the Espositos grew up on. And because my great-grandfather was the oldest boy, his mother gave him the money to walk from Basin Road to Bellevue Avenue to Judge Burns' house and go pay the rent. And he was 2 cents shy of the rent, and Judge Burns made him walk all the way back to Basin Road for 2 pennies. And he came back. And there was no love lost between Judge Burns and my great-grandfather, but he swore he would own his house one day. And he did.
What was the location of the house?
The location of the house, the exact address, I'm not sure, but corner of Washington and Bellevue.
Yeah.
There's a Firestone there now.
Right.
Okay.
The Esposito home is still behind it.
It's just a lesbian, some kind of
But there is a another picture of the emergency room that they had at their house, which was on the 3rd floor before they built the maternity Esposito home outside in the back. My great-grandmother had rose gardens and koi ponds, and my great-grandfather, not only being miraculous in his physician and capabilities as a doctor, he was a bit of a prankster. And he took some of the hospital tubing and he rigged it around for garden cement seats. And when people came over, such as pharmacy reps and things like that, he would take them out into the garden, serve lemonade, and he would turn a little knob on the seat, And by the time that these representatives who he did not like would leave, their pants would be all wet. He was quite MacGyver for his time. The top left is his sign, which is actually on his gravestone from the house. See the top left? No. Top right is his gravestone. Top left is my great-grandfather with my grandfather. And you can see lots of family resemblance between my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and myself. We have a very strong gene in the family. At the bottom right is my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my Uncle Bobby, which Robert was the other Esposito son, and he was a chemist. And bottom left is both men in their uniforms, one for the Air Force, one for the Army, with my grandmother in the middle, and my great-grandparents on each end. Oh, it didn't fall through. This slide's missing some information, I do apologize. Okay, there's a few prankster stories. There's supposed to be 2 else on here, but I guess it didn't save correctly. But I will recount them for you. One of them, because he was such a prankster, one night, his birthday was coming up, and my great-grandmother Myrtle was throwing a surprise masquerade birthday party for him, so they sent him out on a house call, hoping to keep him away from the house for as long as possible while they got things ready and while the guests arrived. The guests were, and it was a masquerade party, so everyone was in costume. Well, as the party is starting and everyone's getting there, there's no doctor, no Anthony. Where did he go? And as everyone starts to panic, because he's not there, and why was he taking so long on the house call? To everyone's surprise, he was there the whole time, in costume, and never said a word.
Where that was going.
Yeah, he was bad. At the bottom, I put a quote in there from Tony at Contenicio that I remember her telling me at one of our Seraptimus meetings, that she remembered being invited to a party at the doctor's house and being so nervous and honored that she had such a lovely food and that they played musical chairs and that the Esposito home was always known for throwing parties. And one of the stories about my great-grandfather is that he had a running pinochle game. And the chief, was it the state chief of police?
Mm-hmm.
State chief of police, fire department, bunch of bigwigs in South Jersey would all play cards every week, pinochle. But being my great-grandfather liked to play tricks, he got a radio that had a microphone. And they were all playing one night. And he excused himself from the room, and he went to the other room, and with his biggest announcer voice he could use, he declared that the Delaware Memorial Bridge was on fire. Whereas the chief of the state police got up and ran, got in his car and drove down to the Delaware Bridge. There was no fire. And he came home, and my great-grandfather, I'm sure, was still laughing. Another time with their pinochle crew, they had decided to play a trick on one of the other members, who I don't know what their name was, but apparently they were always a little bit of a nervous character. So he goes, sometimes the different ones, if my great-grandfather would get a call and have to go make a house call during the game, one of them would drive with him. So he gets in the car and he brings the nervous fella with him. And they get to an intersection and they get held up at gunpoint. And the man says, give me your money or I'll shoot. And my great-grandfather says, go ahead, shoot. And he does. And he shoots my great-grandfather. And the other man gets out of it. Mind you, this was all part of the joke, is the gun was real, but it had blanks. So he fake died, and the guy got out of the car and ran for his life. They didn't find him again until the next morning. It's a very, very bad prankster. So, yes, these are the stories I know about my great-grandfather. My grandfather, Dr. Joseph Irwin Esposito, was born April 18, 1990. He attended Hammonton High School. Then he went off to LaSalle Hospital, which I didn't know it was a hospital then, where he went on to Hammonton Medical School and conducted his internship at the Misericordia Hospital in West Philadelphia, PA. When he came back to Hammonton, we all know that he opened up his practice following in his father's footsteps. In more ways than one, as a doctor, he helped out the maternity world with my great-grandmother, who was still serving as a nurse at the time. So, I have a question. Since most people during the time period of 1919 and 1960 were delivered by a Dr. Esposito, first or second, how many people in this room were delivered by an Esposito? It's two.
It's two.
Yeah. So, I have a picture of him as a young man. The article is about how he came back here and opened up a practice. There's another one of him and his mother, and there's one with him holding a chicken, which they had pets, not pets, he thought they were pets, the chickens, which didn't work out very well, because then his mother would kill them to eat them for dinner. Which is why, as an adult, he didn't eat chicken. Here's some other information. He was a first lieutenant and captain at some point in the United States Air Force, stationed in England. Since apparently this did not make the updates from earlier, what he did is he was part of a commission that loaded the bombs onto the actual aircrafts. And so that's what he did while he was in England. And his commanding officer was Jimmy Stewart. Dr. Joseph Irwin Esposito and Rita Harriet married in 1942. I have not been able to find the date. They had 4 beautiful children and 11 grandchildren. Rita Harriet was born on June 14, 1919, and died April 26, 2002. Now, that's upsetting that this slide is wrong. I'm going to see if I can just fix the slide for just 1 second. My apologies. There we go. Sorry. So these are Joe and Rita's children. There's 4 of them. Vicky Rita, who married Jeffrey McLaughlin and has 1 child. Paul, who's sitting right here. And my mom, Susan, and me, I'm the 1 child. Don and Jean, who married Greg Ingram, and they have 5 children. And they think they're on 3 grandchildren at this point, too. And Lee Esposito, who's divorced but also has 3 children. I included the stories that my father told me. My grandfather also had a running weekly thing like his father, but it was a weekly sports tournament with the then chief of police, Nick Cirillo. They would start with golf during the day. The chief was a much better golfer. Then they would come back to bowling alley and bowl first. The doctor was the better bowler. And then, oh, and by the way, they would do this for money, of course. And the last thing they would do was shoot pool at the bowling alley. They were both very good, and so it wouldn't be for the pot by the end of the night. I remember correctly too, part of the way that my grandfather paid for school was hustling pool in Philly. That was also a small story for him too. And as my father also told me, probably where I get my corniness from is my grandfather apparently was very corny, and it never got tired of just telling the same old joke over and over, like the man fell off the building and did not get killed. Why? Because he's wearing his light spring suit. Or sometimes it's his light fall suit. Or he would break out in song, "Who hit Nellie in the belly with a flounder?" I don't know that one. Or, "Who put the overalls in Mrs. Murphy's chowder?" No one answered, but everyone hollered the louder. I don't know either of those songs. But that's what my dad remembers. The other story I didn't put in here, he was not as big of a prankster as his father was, but my father and my dad came home late shopping. Dinner promptly was at 5 o'clock every day because the doctor's office was open during certain hours, and that was family time. So when they arrived home at 5:30 from shopping in Philadelphia for clothes for the school year, that my grandfather had a sign on his chest and a lily saying that he had died of starvation instead of feeding himself. So he might have been a remarkable man as well, but he couldn't cook, obviously. My grandfather. I've listened to stories of how he was involved in town and how he had had many friends. I've seen his many bowling trophies from being in the league at the Devonados Bowling Alley. He played golf with Nick Vargas, our town pharmacist, at the Buena Vista Country Club. The Robleskis told me how they would say their prayers at dinner and include him for giving Ed the chance to belong to a town full of Italian and be a doctor. Dad telling me how he enjoyed going to baseball games with his dad and how his father knew every fact out there about baseball statistics. I have had people tell me he delivered them or gave them a shot for being sick, or would come to their house once their parent called to come and make them feel better. I have one real image of my grandfather, and it is because of everyone over the years who have shared the story. I have two memories of him, though I was shy of turning 4 when he passed away. My personal stories is one, loved green popsicles. So he hated it when his grandchildren ate them. So he told us they were poisonous. We ate them anyway, and he screamed Rita over and over again because he'd see us eating his favorite popsicle. 2, for some reason he got left in charge of me and nobody else was around, and he didn't obviously know how to feed me, so he got 2 spoons and he took the chocolate jimmies out of the cabinet and we sat and ate them all. Which is today why I still like chocolate jimmies. And that's a picture of me and him at the bottom. My final Esposito story is also from the book. And it's the ancient joke about how a man ran so fast around a haymow that he met himself has a sort of parallel in a chase around the West Philadelphia Homeopathic Hospital, which occurred a few days ago. Every institution of that kind has to contend with the professional patient who feigns illness in order to obtain a bed for the night. And it was one of these fakers who staggered into the hospital and fell gasping for breath in the hallway. A couple of nurses ran to him, and fearing that he was dying, they sent for Dr. Esposito, the head resident. The physician felt his pulse, which was unusually strong for a man having a fainting fit, and to the surprise and indignation of the assembled nurses, he grabbed the alleged sick man by the back of the neck and ran him out the door. It was then that an astonishing change was sought in the patient. He suddenly became full of action and, grabbing up a couple of bricks, darted after Dr. Esposito, who fled around the yard with the man after him. Several times they encircled the hospital. Each time it was seen that the young physician was gaining on the pursuant in more ways than one. He was outdistancing him from the front and gaining on him from the rear until, by the surprise of the pursuer, he felt himself grabbed from behind. The bricks wrested from his hands, and in a second he was flying out the gate, propelled by the athletic doctor's foot. So those are all my stories that I have for today, and I hope everyone enjoyed them. And I think I'm on time, just about, with the Q&A. Mm-hmm. So, you can turn the lights back on. Nick, please.
That was really great stuff. That was
Thank
good.
you.
Good job, girl. Nice job. Very
Thank
nice.
you.
I have a question.
Yes.
When I was a kid in the 50s, this is what I remember. I went to some hospital in Hammonton and had my tonsils removed. So I'm assuming it's
That's
either
it.
your great-grandfather or your grandfather that did the operation. I'm
Your
not
grandfather,
really
great-grandfather.
sure.
50s, it would have been my grandfather. My great-grandfather died in 1949.
Okay, yeah,
Yep.
and I know the high point of that was that after the operation, they gave me ice cream.
Yeah, same thing happened to me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you, Devin. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.